we're good.
Okay, so everyone, welcome to the Main Street Open for Business. I'm going to be talking about the new Facade Energy Grant Program. So you can go to the next slide. So a summary of this, let me get rid of this box. See if I can move this down. So a summary of this program is DOLA was awarded just under $7 million that was allotted through Senate Bill 252 as an incentive to help our businesses come out of COVID and come back strong. We are focusing on doing energy efficiency improvements and aesthetics improvements or facade improvements to buildings in order to create a ripple of effect of investment in the downtown. What we do know that is absolutely true, when you do facade improvements, it absolutely increases property values. It also should point to, and studies over the last 40 years have said, if you make your building or your business more enticing, that it also increases sales and revenues. And what the metrics are for this particular program is if you're doing energy improvements, we want to see a lowering in the utility bills that will be seen by the business owner, giving them more money in their pocket. We hope it adds to jobs or retains jobs as folks are recovering from the pandemic, and it needs to increase sales or revenues. I do have a question for you, Zach. This box that has that you're recording, mute, and everything else, how do I move that so I can see the slides? It's in the middle of the page, and I'm not able to drag and drop it anywhere.
Are you accessing via the web or accessing via the Teams app?
The Teams app.
The recording box should have like the blue bar that says this meeting is being recording. That should have a dismiss button on it over on the right side.
No, it's got a hang up button. I'll keep moving through. I know these slides. I just thought I'd ask.
Okay, yeah.
Let's go to the next slide. So who's eligible to apply for this? And it was one of the very first things that we took a look at. It is local municipalities, counties, and council of governments. We are asking, just as a side note, if someone is not an affiliate or an official community of Main Street, that they fill out a very short and simple affiliate application that's on our website. That's just so we can get you plugged into our system and make sure that we're communicating with you. What can happen and how we're envisioning this is going to work and maybe work the most effectively is whoever is awarded money through this grant program has two options of how they gift this money out. And we are offering a 50% upfront capital cost with the grant, which took a little bit of time to get through all of the proper approvals. But an awarded grantee can either subgrant out this money to building or business owners directly for them to do the improvements, or I think maybe on a more economies of scale opportunity is that the grantee could actually contract out to a general contractor to bundle projects and maybe have a better success rate of getting contractors to perform the work in the very short time frame that this grant has to be implemented and spent. And if people have questions along the way, I can't see a chat box, but Zach, feel free to interrupt, as we go from slide to slide, and I'll address those.
Great, will do.
Next slide. So the timing, here's the real cruncher on this. Our first application round is going to be August 23rd. Just so everyone on this call knows, we don't expect from the large emails and questions and calls and Zoom meetings that we've been holding once a week, we don't expect there to be funds after that first application round, giving the overwhelming response. So it's a very short timeline to the first deadline. It's already August 4th. The funds have to be spent, not encumbered, spent by June 30th, 2022. And in all probability, by the time we get the contracts, awards, and everything in place, it's probably going to be the 1st of October. So that makes this grant program basically a 10-month cycle. Next slide. So here's the types of things that are eligible for both the facades and energy. And I know you guys are reading these going, wow, you know, I certainly am. We've had a lot of questions for other things that aren't necessarily on this slide. And I am telling folks to reach out to any of the folks on staff, and their contact information is the last slide in this presentation. But it's for those types of things that may be deferred maintenance, or things that haven't been done by a building or business owner, because basically a lot of times these small businesses just do not have the capital to keep their buildings up to snuff. And this has been a real passion of mine, because when I joined this program after being a Main Street manager in Granby, Colorado, this was a gap to do these kinds of things that small businesses just can't afford to do. So this money is meant to really give your downtown a facelift, and actually spark some economic vitality, which is going to bring in business and make your downtown vibrant. The one note I do need to point out for those of you that live in a historic district is any applications that are submitted have to follow all local design guidelines or historic preservation guidelines. And if modifications are going to be made to the building, they must follow the Secretary of Interior standards. I'm currently in the process of hiring a preservation architect to support the Main Street staff in order to be able to do those evaluations in a streamlined time frame, as well as working in coordination with History Colorado to get their approvals. But it is going to take maybe a couple of extra weeks from submitting an application to get all those approvals to move forward with improvements to historically designated buildings. Next slide. So some of the funding details, and I alluded to this a moment ago. DOLA is going to advance 50% of the funds that are awarded at the time that we execute the grant agreement. The remaining 50% of the funds will be captured or claimed by the grantee when 50% of the work is done. And the reason I'm doing it that way is we want to make sure that the money does get spent, and this is a successful program that would hopefully get, continued into the future, because it is a gap, as I said before. So we will be in contact all along the way and track metrics quarterly, if not checking in with you monthly to see how your progress is going. The other thing that we also know is happening all around the state is supply chains are limited. Cost of materials have gone up, and getting contractors to do the work is somewhat difficult, particularly in our rural communities. So our goal from the program's perspective is having this money up front and being able to hire a general contractor to maybe come in and do multiple buildings might be a way to execute and get through this money a little bit quicker. The granted entities also have the capability to provide forgivable loans to the business owners, again, decreasing or eliminating the need for the business owners to have upfront capital. That's because there is a 20% match on this, which I will get to on another slide, but there is some things that the granted or awardee can do to help, streamline this process and make it doable up front. We're also going to collaborate with other agencies. There might be quite a few people on this call that are familiar with the other portion of Senate Bill 252, which is the Community Revitalization Grant. That particular program was awarded $65 million to focus on the arts and creative industry district in order to bring workforce housing and shared art space projects to fruition in the next 2 years. So we will constantly be looking at CDOT, their Revitalizing Main Street grant, History Colorado with their micro grants, the Colorado Energy Office with CPACE and some other opportunities to try to leverage some of these funds and do it on a very short time frame. So the one thing I do need to point out, and we're not really giving direction on whether or not you can use federal funds or not, but if you decide, the local grantee decides that they want to use federal funds such as ARPA, it could cause a delay in the projects because all of those will need a Section 106 review between our architect and History Colorado. Next slide. So what are the requirements of the granted entities? We all know that everyone in our small local municipalities are extremely taxed with all of this federal stimulus money coming in, and depending upon whose shoulders this would sit on, there is going to be an administrative burden to take a look at invoices and approve payments and do the reporting back to DOLA. Because of that, we are allowing up to 5% of whatever the granted funds are to awardee for administration. That may not cover all of the cost, and you may not have the staff capacity to pull this off, but you could potentially hire an accounting firm or a bookkeeper to help you with that particular task. And I talked about that one first because I think it's the most important. I absolutely realize how strained everybody is at this point in time. In addition, just like all other DOLA grants that you guys have probably tapped into, you got to collect and retain all the proper information for an IRS 1099. And we will be asking you again to submit quarterly reports. And then at January, if you're not halfway through and haven't asked for your 50% second installment of funding, we're going to do a check-in with folks and say, can you really get the projects done? How far along are you? Winter is obviously going to cause some delays because a lot of facade improvements can't be done during cold weather. But we're going to do a check back in because we want to make sure that this money is going to be spent. And if there's some shift or changes that have to happen at that point, the program will handle that with the awardee, and we'll make it work for you to the best of our ability. And then at the end of the time, you know, if June 30th you're not done with the work, we'll have to deobligate the funds and bring them back to the state. So requirements of the subgranted businesses. There's a lot of templates on our website pertaining to this particular program. One of the ones, two are for the business owners. One is for them to fill out a one-page Excel spreadsheet that actually states the scope of work that they're asking to be done. They need to confirm and acknowledge the agreement and the timeline and their reporting requirements, which will happen and continuing on a year after this award. So we can measure success in terms of increased sales revenues, jobs, or energy reductions. And I'm losing my voice. Give me just 1 second. In the submission itself, we're asking for photos and details of what the proposed work is. That does not necessarily mean that you need to have engineering drawings or details of anything. But what it does mean, and what I'm telling people from a time efficiency standpoint, is to take the before photos of your building, make a copy, and maybe circle, you know, the windows, or you need to redo the canopies, or you want to redo the paint and the facade. Mark up a photo so that we can see what improvements you are proposing for the building. And then the business building owners are going to have to report quarterly, because otherwise I am required to report to the governor, since this is a wildly important goal of his, on a quarterly basis, how we're progressing. The reporting requirements to the business owners will all be confidential. I am not asking for people to give me their sales per business because that is proprietary information. But what I am going to be asking for is the year before and the current year. What is the % increase in sales or jobs created, so that I can report that up.
Gail, for the photos of the business, you know, showing the proposed areas to be improved, do those need to be collected and submitted by
Yes.
the August 23rd deadline?
Yes, there will be.
Okay.
a one-page summary of what the applicant is proposing that we do. And again, that's an Excel spreadsheet that might list 5 buildings on it for a total of $500,000. And then attached to that cover sheet and the application will be a packet from the building owners saying, here's my one-page proposed scope of work. Here's the before photos. Here's the changes that I want to do. And on that spreadsheet, there's going to be 4 columns. In addition to the scope of work, it's going to be a cost estimate for that. And then I've added in a contingency, which I'm, saying throw in a 10% contingency on that based on the fluctuations that are happening in the marketplace, not only because of supply chains, but also on some of these older buildings, when you get in to replace a window, you find that you have to also fix the frame and add some insulation. So instead of going through a variety of change orders, I'm just suggesting that people put a 10% contingency in there for the what ifs. So here's the team. We're a lean, mean team of 4. I forgot to introduce myself. I apologize. I am Gail Langley. I'm the state coordinator for the Main Street program. I was a little razzled by being a few minutes late on this. That's not how I typically roll. And I've been with DOLA about 4.5 years. And if you have questions, you can take a photo of this slide. Please reach out to myself, Tracy Stoffel, who is our Main Street specialist, Larry Lucas, who is our Main Street architect. He can answer a lot of the details on historic buildings or architectural changes that you might want to, or you are discussing with the building owner. And then we also just added Will as a support to help us with the grant administration of this. And I ended just a couple of minutes early, Zach, so that's good for me to see whether or not people have questions. And please do. I've fielded at least 15 a day after people have read through the eligibility and application requirements, particularly in the area of scoring. And I alluded to this at the beginning, but part of the grant submission is also going to be a needs assessment, which I would believe that most of the communities on this call do not have a specific need and have a pretty hefty general fund balance. We are trying to be very diverse in putting this money out across the entire state, making sure that we're hitting minority businesses, veteran-owned businesses, rural communities, and not focusing the money just entirely on the Front Range. The governor wants to see this spread out. So if you do have a community that could tap into this type of resource and help your businesses out, and you really don't have a need, I'm just going to say maybe you pass on this opportunity and look at other ones. I don't think we're going to have any problem with getting $7 million out the door by September. So I just wanted to say that. I know how much time it takes for people to fill out these applications and the outreach to the business owners. So think thoughtfully about whether or not this is something that is an idea that could spark some of your ARPA money in your own community doing something similar, or if this is something you really want to go after. And we will consider all applications regardless if you have a need or not. It's just whether or not they'll be as competitive as the ones that really do have a broken downtown and need some help.
Gail, you have office hours scheduled where folks can attend if they have other questions, is that right?
We do, and why don't I pull that up and see if I can add that into the chat box. We have 2 more. They're every Thursday at 1:30. Got to get my mouse to work here.
I'll put your contact info in the chat box for everybody too.
Oh, thank you. Give me a second and I will pull up my calendar and I will paste that in. There's no registration required on these. We're leaving it open. And all we're just asking people do is to join us and bring your questions. We just do a recap of the program. Let me add this here. Now I got chat box pulled up. Okay, it's not letting me paste it. Copy. We have trouble with Microsoft Word. It won't let me paste the Zoom instructions.
I think you sent them to me in an email. Let me see if I've got them.
Well, I got it copied. Copied. Won't let me paste it in the chat.
Okay, I'll take care of it.
If Zach, when I hop off this call, I'll just send it to you via an email so that you can send it out. We would love to have people, and I know there's not a lot of time left. This has been out on the street for about 3.5 weeks, and it may be the first time you guys have heard about it. So it's a very short time frame, but that's what we have to live with, and we are going to make this happen.
So no possibility of extension of the application deadline?
We're going to ask, but legislature is going to do whatever they see fit, and I have no idea whether or not that'll be a possibility.
Okay. Any other questions?
It's unfortunate because really we're going to miss a whole summer season when a lot of this work could have got done.
Yeah. Any other questions from anyone else on the call for Gail?
It was a lot of information covered really quick.
Yeah, yeah.
On our website.
I know my head is thinking of like, okay, we got less than 3 weeks here, or just about 3 weeks. How could we pull this together, and what would we focus on, and what would we pull it together for? And yeah, lots of things to think through.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll let you get back to your meeting. I did take the entire 30 minutes, and I appreciate everyone's time. And again, my apologies for being a couple minutes late.
Great. Thanks for coming, Gail. We really appreciate it. Thank you for you making time, especially in your busy schedule.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. So yeah, definitely some interesting things there, I think, for all of us to think about. A short time frame. So happy to continue the conversation online or over chat or whatever. But yeah, I mean, electrification is included, energy efficiency is included, of course, all the facade improvements, definitely things of value. Just could any of us pull it together by the 23rd to get it in application? I don't know. Yeah. But speaking of being busy, we've got a packed agenda here today, and Colin's on and is going to talk to us about the recent legislation that passed as it relates to business sustainability. So I wish we probably should have devoted a whole hour to the Main Street open for business conversation, or maybe we're all going to pass on it. But please feel free to respond to this group with, over email with any thoughts, like, do you think you might apply? What might you apply for? Do you want help or assistance? Certainly PACE is happy to help in any way we can. But with that, I'll turn it over to Colin to talk about some incentives and regulations that are upcoming in the next couple of years on our local businesses.
All right, Zach, can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay, great. And so once I start this, assuming I'm able to actually get the right window, I will not be able to see the chat. So holler at me if anything is going wrong. So I am sharing up, and is everyone able to see my first slide?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So here goes. So I'm Colin Tom. I'm the climate and health strategist here at Boulder County, working in the Oscar office with Zach. And I'm going to cover very quickly a little bit about business engagement and how that's important in the policy process. And then I'm going to move on to the legislative session, what passed that affects businesses directly. And then I'll pass it back to Zach for a little on implementation. So it's important to engage in the policy process, and I'll talk about that a couple times. One is that on both legislation and regulation, I work mostly on regulation. it's critical for businesses to get involved and through groups or others, because support for climate legislation in the business community is critical, but it's also mostly invisible. Working especially on the regulatory side, I would say that most of the businesses that are incumbents in that space oppose climate policy generally. It's usually the kind of folks who are used to the members of what they call the regulated community, who are trying to keep any regulation kind of far from them. And so we don't hear a lot of climate positive businesses, business voices for climate action in the space. And so, I'm starting out just, not to bury the lead, to shape rules that are that work for the economy and for the environment. It's important for businesses to become stakeholders, either through chambers, business groups, or even on their own. So I'm going to get right into the ways that you can do that. You can do that through public comment, meeting with state implementing staff. This is particularly on the regulatory side. You can just Google something and find out, which state staff are working on it. Get in touch with them. There are through chambers, certain other business organizations. I've listed a few here that share your mission. It's really important to get involved so that the types of rules and regulations that are proposed align with your values and what actually works in business. There is also, for a deeper level of engagement, there's stakeholder engagement directly with the state, and also you could seek party status in rulemakings. I'm open to any questions on that kind of stuff later, or you can, my email will be on the slides. So I'm going to go straight into this past session. There are a number of rules that, a number of legislative bills that passed that involve potential incentives, also a few that involve regulations. I will distribute these slides, so don't worry about taking notes furiously. And so I'll get right into the incentives. There are several on electricity and gas utilities. Those of you who may have applied for demand side management incentives, otherwise known as rebates, those are going to become much, much better on the gas side. And this is through the modernization utility gas demand side management standards legislation in order to kind of make the gas incentive programs much more similar to electric incentive programs. They haven't been to date. There's also accompanying bill that's more about greenhouse gas emissions reduction, but that called Clean Heat, that kind of backs up and provides incentives through the other demand side management bill. On the renewable energy side, if you've ever tried to install solar, that should become easier. And for example, you will qualify for renewable energy credits up to 200% of projected use, rather than the famous and much maligned 120% limit. You can now carry forward monthly bill credits, and you won't be regulated as utility if you try selling your on-site solar power. So overall, it does make commercial solar more viable, and the goal is to encourage distributed renewable energy. There are a lot of great solar gardens and utility scale installations, but distributed generation is also very important. And there are a lot of great big groups out there in this commercial community that we need to be able to take advantage of.
Colin, Katie Baum from Louisville has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Go ahead, Katie.
Colin, can you explain a little bit more the carry forward of the monthly bill credits? I'm assuming, like when we're looking at Excel, you can bank your solar production credit. Is that what that means? I'm just trying to.
It's to future years. You don't have to net out in a year, is my understanding.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
You know what,
I'm
Kitty,
relatively ignorant to
well,
to this bill, so I can also just go in and check out the language too. But yeah, I'm just trying that's interesting. So I'm just trying to
yeah, I think it's
so
to
it rolls
future
over
years.
essentially.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's
and this
my
is
understanding. I'm also happy to
yeah,
look
this is
into
Carolyn Elam. I can offer if
Oh.
you're banking your credits now, like you made the election, it doesn't materially change what you're experiencing now. It's more, for new program entrants, not defaulting them necessarily into the cash out at the year. It's more just kind of protecting the functionality that you have available today and allowing that increase in credits, as Colin mentioned, to the 200% realm. So, like I said, if you're banking now and carrying forward from year to year, it doesn't materially change what you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. I appreciate that. Yeah, I work mostly on the regulatory side, so I would have to do research on a few questions if that's needed, but I'm also happy to do that, unless Carolyn has the answer, but she might. So I will, if there are no other questions on that, I'll move ahead. So on the beneficial electrification side, this does incentivize transforming current gas loads to electrical loads, especially given that the grid is cleaner. There's some doubts about how clean natural gas is. And there's a general understanding at the state that we need to be electrifying current gas loads. And so this will involve incentives for commercial and residential customers. It does target 20% of expenditure as well as reductions, number of projects to low income. I'm going to kind of whip through a few of these. The transportation is really big. This will involve, is a huge bill, incentives derived from a variety of fees, 5 state enterprises for new state enterprises, and these various fees will come back as incentives for EV infrastructure, fleet conversion. And there is a gas fee there that ratchets from 2 cents to 8 cents towards the end of the decade. That is a huge bill. Happy to answer more questions about that going forward. It does require CDOT to conform to climate goals and redrawing their 10-year plan. This was a huge negotiation for this one. I'm gonna cover this only briefly, but I did throw this in just to give a little context to pricing carbon for those who are interested. There are a couple forms of price on carbon, and one in the federal social cost of carbon, which is currently being reevaluated, and we do expect new values from that task force in January. That may triple, is the foreshadowing. It may, we'll see, but it will definitely come into play. A lot of the bills that passed this year have that being part of the economic impact analysis at state level projects, and that is new. So while it's not a price or a fee levied on carbon, it's definitely in the mix as far as comparing cost benefit of potential rules. There isn't going to be a state level economy-wide cap and trade per Governor Polis, who's more mandates than, who is more markets than mandates. But I do note that in House Bill 1266, there is a fee per ton of greenhouse gases that will materialize in the form of grants to be awarded by the Environmental Justice Advisory Board for environmental mitigation projects created by that bill. Gonna quickly go into some of the regulatory side. A couple of these you'll want a lot of detail on. I mentioned House Bill 1266. It's called the Environmental Justice Act. It is where the majority greenhouse gas reductions come from and are kind of codified through this bill, as well as some very specific provisions for disproportionately impacted communities, and it defines those communities. So we do have some of the major reductions here. And as far as regulation for businesses, this is going to it's kind of an umbrella. They're not like specific regulations. On businesses through 1266, except for industrial manufacturing. But it does, as I said, put that price that can come out in the form of grants. I'm going to go into the ones you're probably most interested in, and Carolyn will probably be watching and may have some comments on these. So this is the energy performance for commercial buildings. Of course, the City of Boulder has had a benchmarking program in place for years. This originally started out with a lot of performance standards. Now it's largely a benchmarking program for buildings 50,000 square feet or larger occupied by a single occupant. So that does include multifamily, except for single family duplex and triplex. There is foreshadowing of performance standards in this bill. So there are exemptions for certain buildings. A lot of these exemptions are to be determined by a task force created by the bill that's charged with examining building types with unique energy needs. Also exempt storage facilities without heating and cooling, and buildings in which more than 50% of square footage is used for manufacturing, industrial, or agricultural. There will be annual data collection, periodic benchmarking, and there is a $100 fee per building by owners or for owners. So the Colorado Energy Office is largely in charge of this. They will convene that task force that I mentioned. They solicit feedback from, they need to solicit feedback from industries and building owners. This is where that engagement comes in that I'm talking about. So the Colorado Energy Office is going to solicit, they're going to need to do outreach, so keep an eye out for that. They're going to look at those building types with unique needs that could potentially be exempted. And develop and provide recommendations to that Air Quality Control Commission is what that is, to the General Assembly and the governor on performance standards that would emerge from this bill eventually, and to coordinate local governments. Because, for example, City of Boulder has their own benchmarking program and would need to coordinate with Colorado Energy Office to make sure that all this stuff makes sense and doesn't make a lot of extra work. So quickly covering the schedule on this, you can see that it's really gets rolling next year, 2022, and then the process of promulgating rules for performance standards begins mid-2023. So that's 2026 and 2030. Those are the reductions in the greenhouse gas roadmap that the Colorado Energy Office came up with. And those actual standards are TBD by the Air Quality Control Commission, with substantial input from the Colorado Energy Office and hopefully from commercial building owners. So that is the schedule for this. Oops. Before I move on, are there any comments from Carolyn or any questions on buildings?
Yeah, this is Karen. I'll just comment. I mean, obviously, Boulder's had this our ordinance in place for a number of years. We shared a lot of our experiences with the Energy Office when they were working on this bill, and we're happy to work with the other jurisdictions who are now going to be impacted by this with any of our lessons learned or support that we might be able to provide to building owners as they move through this. But just wanted to offer that up.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks for your thanks for your great inputs. And I know that we'll be working together on this as well, the implementation here. So I'm going to jump to plastics really quick. This is the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. And that is a real advertisement. I know we're not talking about cellophane here, but yeah, don't try that at home. This is that famous fee on all paper and plastic bags, ban on single-use plastics and polystyrene, and the repeal of preemption for local regulation, for example, City of Boulder. So moving into the schedule for that, it is a 10-cent carry-out bag fee for a year. enacted in stores, and single-use plastic bags will be prohibited, as well as expanded polystyrene prohibited after January 1, 2024. That's a pretty simple schedule there. I did want to note some exemptions. It's kind of fun to read some of the detailed language. I don't know, maybe I'm weird, but it entertains me to read how specific some of this language is. Exempted stores, there is a small store, 3 or fewer locations solely in Colorado, not a part of a franchise corporation or partnership with locations outside of Colorado. So those are exempted. Bags are exempted for pharmacy in-store bags reflecting vegetables, live insects, fish, crustaceans, mollusks, or other small species. They aren't specific as to what other is. And bakery, laundry, dry cleaning. So really special use plastic bags. Takeout retail food establishments seem to be exempted from the bag prohibition. And then plastic bags may be provided during the first half of 2024 if they're part of the store's remaining inventory. So where does the fee money go? The 10 of the 10 cents.
Katie has a question.
Yeah.
So we've been working through this bill quite a bit. We passed a voter approved 25-cent bag tax last fall. So we get to figure out how these get to work together. And so just for clarification, just on our end, so that I make sure that we've been reading this right. So the takeout retail food establishments, they are exempted from the bag prohibition, and yet they aren't exempted from the 10-cent state fee. So they will continue to collect that state fee even past the bag prohibition, correct?
You mean beyond 2024?
Yes.
That I would like to confirm that with our legislative analyst, but Zach, if you would write and email me that question and copy George, that'd be great. And we can get an answer to Katie.
Can do.
Thank
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I need to know that as well. But I think you're correct from what I recall reading. Okay, so let's see, where does that fee money go? 60% goes to the municipality for administration or recycling, composting, and waste diversion efforts. This is remitted quarterly by the store, and 40% the store retains, to make that job easier, and is not counted as revenue for sales tax. Also, customers are exempt who are participating in federal, state, and food assistance programs. So that's the plastic. And I wanted to quickly cover, I'm checking the time, and I want to just very quickly cover a very specific case of engagement as an illustration, and that is the transportation regulations. Some of you may have heard about or been involved in the employee trip reduction program, or E-Trip, which was withdrawn due to, in large part, to business chamber and some local government opposition. Most stakeholders cited insufficient engagement of businesses before the program was drafted, and that's why the state withdrew it. And so now what this means is all the GHG reductions for the transportation sector will have to come from CDOT planning and budgets, and that's going to be really tough. I'm involved in that process right now. And the reason I bring this up is this is a great example of where we need better business engagement through chambers early in the process, so that the rules that are proposed actually make sense for businesses and to meet our climate goals. And transportation is Colorado's #1 source of greenhouse gases. It is also nationally. And so far, you may be aware we have ozone action alerts for the Front Range. They are at 40 this summer, and we are already at nearly a month consecutively. And so that's it's been a really hard summer, and we really have to tackle this, and transportation is key to that. So that's just kind of my illustration of how better business engagement can really do us a favor. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach.
Thanks, Colin. Can you go to the next slide? So once again, probably should have devoted an hour just to this too. But, you know, it occurred to us that, you know, there is a need for getting awareness out into the business community, you know, particularly about the regulation that's coming, and also, you know, so that's the commercial benchmarking, the bag fee, the bag ban, the styrofoam ban, and also the rollout of this legislation and regulation will impact the willingness to support and accept new legislation coming. And we know that, you know, there's going to need to be more sustainability related legislation coming, because we're very far away from solving climate change at this point. So this won't be the last of it. And so we've started thinking about, you know, how can we help the businesses in our community smoothly transition into these new requirements in the ways that are as at least painful as possible. And given that, you know, that they're fairly universal requirements, although there'll be, you know, some local variation between, you know, Louisville's bag fee at 25 cents and the way City of Boulder does theirs. But, you know, in general, you know, these are statewide universal. You know, how would we want to collaborate across communities on helping to roll these out? You know, do we want similar sort of, you know, marketing and education materials? We create one campaign collectively together, you know, one educational campaign, or does every community want to go their own way? These are some of the questions we wanted to start thinking about now. So yeah, I guess we're out of time, and maybe we can pick up next month following up on this. But it was something I wanted to put on folks' radar. Certainly, you know, from PACE, you know, we see value in working collectively on this, and definitely we're going to help out every community in Boulder County on implementing these things. For example, we're already doing some work around to go where in Boulder and in Lafayette, and I think that work this year will inform, you know, how we're able to help other communities across the county starting next year. So yeah, wish we had an hour to talk about this alone as well, because there's a lot to do, and from what I understand, there's not, you know, the legislation was passed, you know, partially because it didn't have any fiscal requirements of it in the state, and talking with our state partners, you know, they don't have any budget for this. You know, they were not given money to help implement this regulation. So I think it's, you know, they're going to do what they can, and their office is growing in the pollution prevention department, but still, I think a lot of this is probably going to fall to us. So things to think about and collaborate on in the future. I want to thank everyone for attending today, and hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday. Send me any questions, any follow-up that you have, and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.